The most common question people get in investment banking interviews is walk me through the DCF. But in order to answer that question, you must be able to talk to the WACC. In part one, we tackled the weighted average part, and this is where we tackle the cost of capital part, specifically equity. Now here's the problem. The cost of equity is not readily observable in the market. So what do? Well, we use something called the capital asset pricing model, or CAPM. What the model says is that the cost of equity is equal to the risk-free rate plus the levered beta times the market risk premium. And let's actually tick through each of these one by one. The most straightforward is the risk-free rate. So for a US company, you can use the rate on a US Treasury. Now, typically you use a 10 or 20 year. If you're working in another country, you would basically just get what is the rate on the long-term government bond for that country. Although, fun fact, if you're trying to value a company that is generating cash flows in euros, you would actually use the safest country in the Eurozone, so you'd use the German Bund. Next, we get to the beta, which tells us how much a company's equity moves relative to the overall market. So for example, if our company's beta is 1.25 and the market benchmark, say the S&P, goes up 1%, our company share price, we expect to go up 1.25%. There's a lot that goes into choosing this beta. And I won't get into all the details, but the TLDR is that different banks have different standards about where they get their betas. Some use past betas and look to Bloomberg, where you have like the raw beta, you could take the adjusted beta. Some use betas, where you look at like the forward-looking beta. Point is, there's a lot that can go into this. And all I really need you to know is that you're gonna need to come up with a beta. And finally, the last input is what's called the market risk premium. And this tells us how much an equity investor demands for taking risk over the risk-free rate. It might seem like something that's complicated to figure out. The good news is that there aren't many sources for this. So what most banks use is something called the Duff and Phelps Valuation Handbook. Now, it's actually been rebranded as Kroll, but it literally just tells you flat out, this is what the rate is. Usually it's gonna be in like the 3 to 7% range. Another source that you could go to is Professor Aswath Damodaran, who is an NYU Stern professor, and he is probably like the preeminent valuation guru, but he publishes a equity risk premium every few months or so, and that's also free. Finally, we wanna put this all together. So let's throw some numbers out there. So let's assume our risk-free rate is 4.25, our equity beta is 1.25, and the market risk premium is 5.5 from Kroll. We put that all together and it gets us 11.125% or 11 1/8. All of this, by the way, just to get that WACC calculation, well, remember, this is just the cost of equity. In our last video in the series, we will talk about the cost of debt and putting it all together. Comment below with any questions.